Assassin's Creed 1 is a game that fluctuates between diegetic anything could go right or wrong action to grindy, slow, methodical filler, between a choose-your-own-approach style Hitman game and a linear trailing mission game that goes from boring to frustrating over the course of its drawn-out campaign. But I like to start with the positives, so let's do that. My favourite part of Assassin's Creed 1's gameplay is the chase sequences, when you're caught doing an illegal activity. The way how every chase plays out is entirely different from any other one over the course of the game. I love how you'll need to make a dozen micro decisions during your pursuit. Do I turn down this alley? How do I dodge these pedestrians? Is it worth trying to climb up to the roofs? It's a credit to the world design of Assassin's Creed, the way how the multiple Middle Eastern cities all fade together. It's infrequent you'll remember a specific location. This could be a criticism of how all the cities feel the same across all their districts, but it works in the chases because the identical environments always make you feel lost in these labyrinthine towns. Meaning you won't be able to book it towards your preferred hiding spot every time, and the game will force you to adapt and find new paths to avoid capture. Then on subsequent hunts, you won't be able to find where you were just hidden, and the cycle will start all over again. The same environments ironically make every chase feel incredibly new, and this is where the majority of my enjoyment of playing Assassin's Creed came from. Since the chases are the majority of the action sequences in the game, it makes me reconsider if Assassin's Creed 1 is a stealth game or a parkour game. I indeed spent more time free-running across the crowded streets and sun-stained rooftops of these holy cities than I did slinking in the shadows waiting for my moment to strike. And thinking back, the game never forced me into an instant-fail stealth mission, and many of the upgrades I received seemed to be more helpful in head-on confrontation, like increased health and new sword techniques. So I suppose it was just my general association of assassins with stealth, as all of the hiding and sneaking only comes at the end of a loud hunt for your head roaring across the rooftops. So I think that I now consider the non-RPG style of Assassin's Creed games a parkour franchise rather than a stealth one, but the only other AC games I've played are the RPG ones, so what I said might just sound ridiculous to veterans of the franchise. It's just a shame that even if you're caught, there's no reason you can't just keep running, so it's disappointing how the chases are impossible to lose. Maybe if the guards' attacks did significantly more damage if you weren't in a combat state, but unfortunately all the tension of the pursuits has to come from your own imagination and the sense of pressure the game creates with its music. The chases are also quite frequent due to the fact that the game is incredibly vague on what does and doesn't constitute a crime. It will often feel arbitrary when the alarm goes off, and you're unsure of what you did to provoke the NPCs. Oftentimes it's brushing past a guard while not in stealth mode. This seems like an overreaction and can be annoying when you're trying to reach your objective quickly, but if getting caught is the best part of the game, and it happens constantly, is that a good or a bad thing? To me, it depends on how many consecutive chases I've been on while trying to reach the same objective. It can be annoying, but the pursuits are never a disappointment. If there was one thing holding back the chases, it would be the controls. On the one hand, I love the gameplay and story integration, as the controls are so complicated because Desmond is the one controlling Altair through the Animus. So it makes sense that the controls would be a bit more in depth, but on the other hand it definitely takes away from the fun of the game when the controls feel so finicky. It would be false praise to say that the game was designed around the fact it was supposed to feel like that you were controlling a character who was controlling a character, when the truth of it is just Ubisoft's failure to make a control scheme that made sense. The controls work great in the sense of a parkour game, running across the rooftops, leaping from building to building, with little in the way of obstruction. This is when the stars align for Assassin's Creed 1, and the game becomes far more manageable as the hiding locations stand out more in contrast to the bustling streets. Whilst running on the streets, the controls become hellish. You'll constantly bump into civilians, and due to the number of objects that impedes your progress, it's challenging to escape your pursuers. So if you want the hunt to end quickly, your best option is always heading to the roofs. The truth is, I don't feel like a skilled assassin when I'm on the ground, I feel like a bumbling fool. If I make a wrong turn or try to hide while I'm still in the sightlines of the enemy, the intensity of the chase vanishes as I shuffle past the guards and begin running away all over again. When I'm on the roofs, however, the free-flowing nature of the game kicks in, and I feel unstoppable, the dusty wind making my hood ripple, the beating sun glistening off my blood-soaked dagger. This is when I feel the most alive playing Assassin's Creed. I suppose I should talk about my least favourite part of Assassin's Creed 1 now, and it's the gameplay loop. Now, I like the idea of the gameplay loop in concept, slow, methodical intelligence gathering, and using that intel to plan out a much more high-octane mission to assassinate a highly protected target. Much like a precursor to the missions in the World of Assassination Hitman trilogy, unfortunately, these intel-gathering missions are nothing more than utterly useless padding because the developers didn't want to add more targets. It's not just the fact that each of these intel-gathering missions is incredibly boring. I mean, for God's sakes, one of them is just literally sitting on a bench. It's the fact that each of these missions is totally useless. None of the intel you gather matters when you're assassinating the target, so I thought maybe because you don't have to gather all the intel, the mission changes slightly based on what you do and don't know, but it turns out the only reason to gather all the intelligence is for achievements. I mean, there are formulas and then there's copying the same idea 9 times. The only reasons these missions are here is to pad out the runtime pointlessly. There's no narrative delivery in these missions, there are no gameplay consequences to doing all of them. They only exist to drag out the time you're playing the game and to delay you from getting to the fun part of the central assassination missions. I like the idea of planning out my big missions, a la the pre-heists in Grand Theft Auto 5, and the studying of your target routine in World of Assassination, but there's almost nothing redeeming about the intel gathering in Assassin's Creed 1, other than the fact that more playtime means more chases. Assassin's Creed 1 is a game where the gameplay does one thing incredibly well and everything else quite poorly. The chase sequences remain some of the most freeform fun I've had in an open world in a while, and the many missions you have to complete are some of the most thinly veiled filler I've seen in an even longer while. I liked it more than I hated it, but Assassin's Creed 1 is one of the most freeing and restrictive open worlds I've played in years.